Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org. Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Shop Safeway's brands and get high-quality essentials for low prices. From Signature Select, Lucerne, and O Organics, you can save more on your favorites. Get started at Safeway.com or in the Safeway app.
A new study ranked Colorado Springs among the most boring cities in the U.S. They gave a score based on stuff like the number of concert venues in the city, how many sports teams they have, and the hiking trails they have access to. I don't really buy it, but what do you think? Send us an email and tell us what you like to do in the Springs. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel. Coming up, expanding health insurance used to be a priority in Washington. Now, it's not.
This bill wasn't really about making health care or health coverage better. It was really about taking money from people's care and using it to fund other things.
Then, Colorado grocery workers have negotiated with their employers, and employees at one chain have ended their weeks-long strike.
It eventually expanded to include at least 48 stores across the Front Range and out to Grand Junction.
Plus, the state cracks down on an unlikely source of greenhouse gas emissions.
Running a leaf blower for an hour produces the same amount of that pollution as driving from Denver to Los Angeles.
But does it apply to you if you have a lawn? It's Tuesday, July 8th. Here's the news in Colorado today. Cuts to Medicaid rules are coming. You won't see them happening for more than a year, but the Trump tax bill passed last week solidified that they will be happening. We're going to talk to CPR health reporter John Daly about what that will mean for Colorado, where 500,000 people gained health insurance over the past 10 years. John, you've noted that the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress are essentially trying to undo the Affordable Care Act in pieces. That's the healthcare reform law passed by Obama in 2010. They didn't succeed in repealing it in one fell swoop, but they're chipping away at it. What does the big, beautiful bill do as part of that effort?
Well, it does a lot. It's going to knock more than 100,000 people off of Medicaid by one estimate, either by making them ineligible or making the paperwork so onerous they can't comply. I've heard the work requirements in this bill described as paperwork requirements. It's definitely diminishing the state health insurance marketplace by taking away federal tax credits. Those help people buy insurance through Connect for Health Colorado. Now, that's more than 86,000 people that'll be affected. Its CEO, Kevin Batterson, says the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, has transformed access to health care in Colorado. And these changes over time will unravel that for many.
To me, it feels like you're on the beach and you see the wave kind of go out before the tsunami comes at you. And I think that's really what I am nervous about.
And you know what the budget bill is going to do is pass a lot of big decisions to states, and Colorado will decide if it has to cut people off of Medicaid or other programs. Colorado is going to be dealing with the shortage of the funding and have to make the big decisions about a lot of these programs.
Now, as I mentioned, hundreds of thousands of Coloradans got health insurance through the ACA. What has changed for them based off patients and providers that you've met over these years?
Well, you know, it's meant fewer people with problems like medical debt. It's definitely meant more funding for hospitals that provide all that care. It's meant more preventive care for diseases that many have, like high blood pressure or diabetes, for example, but also behavioral health and mental health treatment. Representative Brittany Pedersen got really emotional on a call last week talking about her mom who struggled with an opioid addiction, but got help thanks to the kind of help that these government programs provide.
So it's going to decimate our behavioral health system, and the people who are struggling with addiction who will no longer have the ability to get care and live in recovery like my mom.
Now, the ACA did come with some drawbacks. It's been expensive for taxpayers to cover. So many people with health insurance, and it hasn't solved all the problems involving insurance, like high costs. In Colorado, some insurers closed and limited their offerings, and that left people with only one option for health insurance in some parts of the state. Also, people who already had insurance might have seen their premiums go up.
Okay, but this is a system that we had for about a decade, and hospitals have become accustomed to using this funding. And now those hospitals are worried about the effects of the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, absolutely. They're worried about the care they provide and the economic impacts of this. I spoke with Jeff Tiemann, CEO of the Colorado Hospital Association. He says, thanks to the budget bill, the state will lose billions of dollars in healthcare funding.
I think it's a direct threat to the health and stability of communities across the country, and particularly rural ones that will be devastated by both the loss of healthcare and jobs that this will mean.
Medicaid and healthcare spending in general is an economic multiplier. You hear that expression a lot. Tiemann says Colorado hospitals, especially rural ones, will have to cut back on services they can provide, like cancer care or labor and delivery, say. Also, patients now, if a hospital closes or loses those services, they're going to have to drive a lot further to get the help that they need.
Yeah, but on the other hand, as you just alluded to, Medicaid uses up a huge portion of the state and federal budgets, and it's been growing. Some have argued that Medicaid is unsustainable in Colorado even before Congress passed this new tax bill last week. Is there an acknowledgement in the healthcare community of these challenges to funding Medicaid?
Yeah, I think that there is in the healthcare world, and they acknowledge that there's a lot of problems with American healthcare, but they would say, a lot of the folks that I've talked to, that this bill wasn't really about making healthcare or health coverage better and fixing a problem that was out there. It was more about using the money that was in those programs that provide people's healthcare and taking it for other things like massive tax cuts for the wealthy or immigration enforcement. And now in Colorado, you do hear rumblings of folks looking for ways to reform the system, maybe considering some kind of special legislative session. Again, this is just rumblings. But others warn with all the changes in this bill and some of them not coming into effect for another year or so, now is not the time to make changes to the healthcare system beyond what's happening through this bill.
CPR health reporter John Daly, thank you.
You bet.
A weeks-long strike by Safeway workers in Colorado came to an end on Saturday. The union reached a tentative agreement with parent company Albertsons. At the same time, King Soopers reached its own deal with its workers, who've been threatening to strike. CPR's Sarah Mulholland is here to round up the grocery store news for us. Hey there, Sarah.
Hey, Arlo.
So give me an idea, how widespread was the Safeway strike and what kind of impact did it have?
Well, the strike started with just 6 stores and 1 distribution center in Denver, but it eventually expanded to include at least 48 stores across the Front Range and out to Grand Junction, so it did get pretty big. What it accomplished is still unclear. The union hasn't released the full contract yet, but in a public Facebook post, they highlighted a few key provisions like fully funded health care benefits, which includes dental, vision, and life insurance, and what they call strong wage increases, but they didn't say anything about how big those wage increases actually are. So again, those terms are broad, and we won't really know the full extent of any gains or concessions until the agreement goes to a vote.
You know, a central issue for the grocery store workers was the understaffing plaguing Safeway stores, or at least according to them. Is there any indication that that was addressed?
Not directly. The union announcement instead mentioned a, quote, test and learn trial to study what they call real and meaningful staffing improvements in stores. So there's an acknowledgement of the issue, but no commitments yet.
So then what happens next?
So the next step is ratification, and what that means is union members will review and vote on the proposed contract. The union says it's working to finalize dates and locations for those vote meetings. And as you mentioned at the start, King Soopers has avoided going on a second strike. That also applies to City Market stores. So their parent company, Kroger, announced a tentative deal with the union just before the July 4th holiday. So we won't be having another supermarket strike anytime in the near future.
CPR's Sarah Mulholland, thank you.
Thanks, Arlo.
Safeway is a financial supporter of Colorado Today, but the company has no editorial influence over our news coverage. Let me take you on a quick trip to a park south of Denver. On a recent morning, Johnny Jimenez supervised a crew at a public park in Greenwood Village. Their job?
Mowing, irrigation, trimming, fertilization, all that kind of stuff. Just maintaining the landscape.
But instead of a roar, their equipment works with more of a whir. That's because their crew recently went electric. CPR's Sam Brash is here to talk about a new state rule requiring some landscapers to make the shift from gas-powered to electric equipment. Hey there, Sam.
Hey, Arlo.
So what is this rule about, and when did it go into effect?
So Colorado air regulators approved this rule a couple of years ago, and it basically bans government entities, so that's everything from like school districts to your local parks department, from using small handheld gas-powered lawn equipment in the summer.
I mean, the key word that you use there is small. Is it really that big of a deal?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it might be kind of surprising because like a leaf blower doesn't have a huge, tailpipe or exhaust pipe or anything like that. But a lot of these tools burn a combination of oil and gasoline at the same time. And as a result, they produce a ton of smog-forming emissions. That's also known as ground level ozone, which is a huge problem here on the Front Range each summer. For a little perspective, one analysis found that running a leaf blower for an hour produces the same amount of that pollution as driving from Denver to Los Angeles.
For 1 hour?
1 hour.
And that's why Jimenez's company has shifted to electric lawn equipment.
Yeah, that's right. He works for a company called Designscapes Colorado, and since it has contracts with cities like Greenwood Village, it's covered by these regulations, which went into effect on June 1st.
So just a few weeks ago was the first time that I had to, go on the trailer and say, hey guys, all your gas equipment has to come off. We're only using electric handheld equipment from here till August.
The company spent about $50,000 to purchase electric equipment. It had a little help in the form of a $12,000 state incentive to do that. And after working with gas-powered leaf blowers and trimmers for years, they're now on all battery-powered handheld equipment.
I mean, $50,000, even with that help, it's still a lot of investment. How is that going for them?
I'd say they're figuring it out. Jimenez says it's taken some time to get his crews comfortable with this new equipment.
So to put a battery-operated machine in their hand, it was kind of like a learning curve, and it still is a learning curve, but it's just trial and error. We have no choice.
The big challenge here is battery management. It's not as simple as just having a few gas cans in their trailer to refuel their equipment. They're constantly trading out these battery packs, but Jimenez says the technology is getting better.
If you're using it for 10 to 15 minutes on your little residential property, it's there. But 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour and a half, 8 hours a day, whatever, on the commercial landscape and business side, it's really not there.
Now, Designscapes has found these tools have some big advantages. Jose Lara is the crew lead for this park working in Greenwood Village, and he says he likes the electric equipment.
Pues están bien porque no hacen mucho ruido.
Basically, it's quieter, but he'd love if it had bigger, longer-lasting batteries so he could work for longer stretches at a time.
Okay, so this is one landscaping company that has made the switch. What about me? I don't own a lawn, but if I did, is the state going to come after me to check whether I'm using an electric lawnmower?
No, it's not. Again, these rules only apply to governments and government contractors, and even then, the regulations are pretty lax. So Michael Ogletree is Colorado's Senior Director of Air Quality Programs, and even though these rules are in effect, he told me the state doesn't have a plan to enforce them with fines or anything else.
Right now, the way we're kind of working towards compliance is through education and outreach and providing some flexibility if there are reasons why any particular entity can't comply with that.
In other words, the state isn't going to crack down on anybody for failing to follow these rules, at least right now.
Wait, if no one's enforcing the rules, why would anyone follow them?
That's a really good question. It seems like compliance right now is probably pretty low. So Denver, for example, has this huge park system. A spokesperson for its parks department told me that they haven't started shifting to electric lawn equipment because they have this huge budget shortfall at the city level right now. And they say that's fine under the rules so long as the city keeps the state informed about what it's doing and why.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you, Arlo.
Thank you for your tips on Colorado Springs and for listening to today's show. Remember to follow Colorado Today in your podcast app. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel. This is CPR News.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Safeway. Shop online and get $30 off your first online order when you use code SAVE30 at checkout. Get the same prices, deals, and rewards as in-store. Get started at Safeway.com or the Safeway app.
Support for Colorado Today comes from Credit Union of Colorado. With access to over 30,000 ATMs and a mobile app, they're dedicated to offering the services of a big bank with a heart. Learn more at honestlygood.org.